Good morning. I'm Reverend Christina Branham Martin, and I'm the interim minister here at the fellowship. It is good to be with you. I am taking a deep breath as we gather here, the few of us putting on this service in the sanctuary. But the sun is shining, and it's a beautiful day, and lovely people are with me, and the internet was down this morning. So our live stream did not work, but we are recording this, editing it, and now it is up on YouTube, and we're glad you are here. This community comes together each week to be together, and right now it is online. And we are inviting people today to join us in the parking lot for a picnic. We know that in these times of being together safely, we have to be creative. And we are joining together in a picnic, and a large tent is on its way. A 20-foot by 40-foot tent is on its way to be installed in the parking lot in the next week or two. As soon as we get the permit, we will start worshiping outside after we do a live stream in the morning at 10 and then a service at 11:15 in the parking lot. We are rolling with the punches. We are being creative. And we're figuring out new ways to be together. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome on this weird day, but beautiful day. And know that this fellowship is a religious community grounded in the heritage and principles of Unitarian Universalism. We seek to create loving community, inspire joy and spiritual growth, and support courageous action. All are welcome. Regardless of religious background, political persuasion, ethnicity, age, ability, sexual orientation, or gender expression or identity. If you have a desire to explore questions of truth and meaning and are respectful of the diversity of our collected community, you have found kindred spirits here. If you'd like more information about this fellowship or Unitarian Universalism, go to our webpage. There is a plethora of information. Most of all, there is a way for you to get connected to our weekly connection newsletter that gives you links to all the things we're doing online together as a community. A couple of announcements that the links will be found in those newsletters are that we've got a Course in Miracles starting tonight on September 12th. There is room for you if you'd like to join. Our congregation is also sponsoring a meal at our Daily Rest later this month. Please consider participating and providing some food for that meal. We're also going to start our fire pit events later in September and into October. I'm going to host the first one, and we invite other people to host on either a Friday or Saturday night at your convenience. The choir is going to start practicing so that they can sing outside in our tent services. We've got bingo each week. We've got Vespers here on Wednesday nights with small groups wearing masks. And we've got Novel Circle each month that is coming up. And last, the tech crew to put on live stream and to edit our services and put them up on YouTube need a few more helping hands. No experience is necessary, just a willingness to learn. We'll train you on what you can do and figure out what fits your skill level. Please consider joining that team. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Brian Cromer is with us today. Please come up. Brian Cromer grew up and went to college in upstate South Carolina before moving away for graduate school. He left his job as a corporate lawyer in 2016 to pursue a career more aligned with his values. And after serving as worship committee co-chair at the UU Church in the Desert in Palm Springs, California, Brian felt a call to ministry. And in September, he starts his second year in the MDiv program at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia. Brian is currently working at First Baptist Greenville with their LGBTQ plus Friends community group. And Brian lives in Anderson with his 2 guys and his 3 dogs. He will now share our opening words with us.
Thank you, Reverend Christina. Let us begin worship with these opening words adapted from words by Reverend Rebecca Savage. We join together today as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. When our chalice is lit, may it melt away the tethers that uphold injustice in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us a radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. Our chalice is a vessel of audacious hope. Our chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly towards our highest ideals. So please join me as we listen to For All That Is Our Life by Corey Dodgins on the piano.
And now we light our chalice. I invite you to gather your chalice at home, be it a candle, a chalice that maybe your child made in the religious education program. As Brian lights our chalice, we share in the words that this community shares each week. Please join me. We gather in the spirit of love. With justice as our guide, this is our chosen covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another. And now, our Director of Lifespan Faith Formation, Karen Hebel, will share a story.
Good morning. It's good to be with you all again on this beautiful day, in whatever way that technology will allow us to be together. You may have heard in the last few days a lot of talk about war, conflict, and peace. Now, peace is a very big idea, and it's so big and abstract that it's hard for us to get our minds around. So, for today's Time for All Ages, I thought I'd share a story with you that is more of a poem than a story. And it's a poem that reminds us that if we practice small acts of giving and sharing and understanding with each other every day, all of those small acts add up together and they can have a great big impact. Peace is an Offering by Annette LaBox. Peace is an offering, a muffin or a peach, a birthday invitation or a trip to the beach. Peace is gratitude for simple things, light through a leaf, a dragonfly's wings. A kiss on the head, raindrops and dew, a walk in the park, a bowl of hot stew. Peace is holding on to one another. Peace is the words you say to a brother. Will you stay with me? Will you be my friend? Will you listen to my story till the very end? Will you wait when I'm slow? Will you calm my fears? Will you sing to the sun to dry my tears? Will you keep me company when I'm all alone? Will you give me shelter when I've lost my home? You might find peace in a photograph or in the deep boom of a belly laugh. And even in the wake of tragedy, even then you might find her in the rubble of a fallen tower, in the sorrow of your darkest hour, in the hat of a hero, in the loss of a friend. Peace is a joining, not a pulling apart. It's the courage to bear a wounded heart. It's a safe place to live. It's the freedom from fear. It's a kiss or a hug when you've lost someone dear. So offer a cookie. Walk away from a fight. Comfort a friend. Sing a quiet song. Catch a falling star. May peace walk beside you wherever you are.
We share now in joys and concerns. The journey of life brings both pleasures and pains, satisfactions and regrets. And as persons who are seeking truth and meaning, our everyday task is one of honoring such experiences as well as integrating them. We fit the pieces together, and in doing so, we find the larger shape our lives are searching for. Part of this process is meaning-making and can be done so in ritual of joys and concerns to which we now turn. These stones are smooth and also have weight. They're indicative of life's pleasures and times of ease, as well as burdens and times of heaviness. This stone today is in honor of Martha Alexander and her service to the fellowship as the corresponding secretary. We were talking recently and we realized she has been doing this for over 20 years. So we celebrate you today, Martha, and this stone is for you. This next stone is for those dealing with short-term and long-term health issues. They carry us through the days into community support. However, illness is such a hard thing to deal with on a daily basis. We want to support you in whatever ways we can. This next stone is for dear Nancy Lemaster, who is now home and recovering from blood clots in both lungs. It was really scary. And she is now continuing to do better, is feeling supported by the community. We have you in our thoughts, Nancy. This last stone is for September 11th and the ways that it changed our lives. It changed our sense of security and safety and peace and our hopes for the world itself. It changed the world. Perhaps you have more that is on your heart. Joys that are unspoken and concerns that are yet to be shared. This stone acknowledges those. May you come to a time in which we can share those with you. Blessed be. We now enter into a time of prayer and meditation, and I want to bring your attention to this quilt behind me. This was made for the event of remembering September 11th here in Clemson on the 10th anniversary in 2011. The event was called Looking Back and Looking Forward towards Compassion, Peace, and Reconciliation. This quilt was shared with us today by a friend of the fellowship, Cynthia Warner. The event 10 years ago was led by many interfaith and community leaders. You may not be able to see this, but the quilt was signed by those who gathered that day. And some of those signatures are members of this fellowship. Those who attended created a pledge for compassion. And I share with you today an excerpt of what was pledged that day. The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious and ethical and spiritual traditions, calling us to treat others as we wish to be treated ourselves. Compassion impels us to alleviate the suffering of others. Born of deep interdependence, compassion is essential in human relationships. It is a path to enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a peaceful global community. We pledge, in both public and in private, to act in accordance with this principle. Close quote. I hope that today, 10 years after that pledge was made with this quilt, and 20 years after 9/11, that we can continue to seek guidance with these words. And the next song we will hear was written right after 9/11 by two singer-songwriters who make up Emma's Revolution. And this version of the song is sung by people all over the world, and it inspires me every time I hear it.
En la paz, creemos en la paz, creemos en la paz, creemos en la paz, salam shalom. We will work for peace, 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 salam shalom. Obramos por la paz, 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 salam shalom. Nous œuvrons pour la paix, 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 salam shalom. Vivimos en la paz, salam shalom. Vivimos en la paz, salam shalom. Vivimos vivimos en la paz. Salam shalom. Vivimos en la paz. Salam shalom.
Nous vivons dans la paix. Salam shalom. Nous vivons dans la paix. Salam shalom. Nous vivons dans la paix. Salam shalom. Nous vivons dans la paix. Salam shalom.
We can live in peace. Salam shalom. We can live in peace. Salam shalom. We can live in peace. Salam shalom. We can live in peace. Salam shalom. 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 Peace. Salam
So for our first reading today, I selected a reflection on Satyagraha from Mahatma Gandhi. On September 11th, in 1906, Mahatma Gandhi coined the term Satyagraha to express his philosophy that nonviolence is a power that can transform adversaries into friends and resolve issues of injustice and oppression. The word Satyagraha uses words that derive from the Sanskrit language. Satya, which is the Sanskrit word for truth, and agraha, which means to grasp and to hold. So Gandhi was basically talking about Satyagraha as holding on to truth. And we've also, in our country, heard it called love force or soul force.
The next reading is an excerpt of MLK Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. These are in his own words, unedited for the time in which he wrote. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Shallow understanding from the people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstandings from the people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection.
My friends, it is so good to be here with you today. I'd like to thank Reverend Christina for inviting me and for her wise counsel as I try to figure out where I'm being called into ministry. I wish that I could see your gorgeous faces here in the sanctuary, because I have to say it's a little scary for me to be up here today to share with you the reflections I'm having on my life as I think about ways that I may still harbor ideas about other people. Why is it so hard to talk about race? Here's some common arguments. We may not want to think it's a race problem. We want to look for other factors. We really need to be talking about class, or it's access to education, or jobs, or healthcare, or housing. Our focus shouldn't really be on race as much as it should be economics. Or we worry if we talk about race, we're just going to make things worse. In March of 2021, Pew Research did a survey on racial discrimination, and 63% of Republican voters, people who lean Republican, said that white people face some or a lot of discrimination. The only group that they said faced more discrimination was Muslims. So they saw white people facing the same amount of discrimination as black people, as Jewish people, and far more discrimination than Asian Americans, Hispanic people, LGBTQ people, and women. Another point is we are so worried about preserving what we think of as peace that we don't want to talk about race with people in our lives. Aunt Edna's so old that she doesn't know any better, and we'll just ignore her racist comment. I don't want to say anything at this family meal because I don't want to offend someone or make someone uncomfortable if I talk about race. And I certainly don't want to ask my black friends about race because that's not their responsibilities to teach me about race. I need to do my own research. I can't use my black friends as my personal Google on racial issues. And another concern is I might say the wrong thing, and maybe they'll get the wrong impression of me. So finally, and this is a big one, we don't want to talk about race because then we might have to confront the fact that we are a part of the race problem. And I'm not talking about just, if I'm not doing something, then part of the problem. I'm talking about our own attitudes that may be so ingrained and hidden to us that we don't even realize it. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. My own racism. It's difficult for me to confront my own beliefs about race because I have never thought of myself as a racist. When I think about people who are racist, I think about white nationalists, the KKK, Nazis. Racists are bad people who call for physical violence against people of color. It's those folks who marched in Charlottesville. I am not like those people. I'm not a racist. I'm a good person. My views about other people don't fit within the dictionary definitions of racism. I don't believe in the inherent superiority of a particular race. I don't practice racial discrimination. I'm not prejudiced against people based on skin color. I cannot be racist. But unfortunately, the words of Martin Luther King Jr. about the danger of white moderates requires me to look further. And this is where I want to pivot to the movement and the Unitarian Universalist Church to add an eighth principle to our beliefs. On June 20th of this year, Kathy Crane introduced the eighth principle to this congregation and proposed that y'all might consider adopting it. The eighth principle reads, "We the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. That a principle lays out a two-part journey, starting with dismantling the racism within ourselves. As I reflect on my attitudes and beliefs about racism, I have to start by examining my life. I grew up in Anderson, South Carolina, and the formative years of my childhood were in the late 70s and early 80s. Although schools were supposed to be integrated, we lived in an all-white neighborhood in a basically all-white part of town. We had 2 black students in our entire elementary school, grades 1 through 6. And they were relatives of a former Clemson basketball player, pro NBA star, Larry Nance. And we didn't think of them as black. We just thought of them as white. This monochromatic world changed for me when I went into 6th grade. Anderson School District 5 had closed an all-black elementary school, and students from that school were divvied up into other classes. For the first time, we had black kids at our school. I remember being afraid the first time that the teacher left the class and left us in the class alone. I had been conditioned to fear black men, and by extension, this 12-year-old boy who sat beside me in class. This fear was ingrained in me and reinforced time and time again. I would be walking down the street and I'd see someone in the distance, maybe a person of color, and I would find myself averting my eyes, holding on to my belongings more closely, and putting my senses on high alert. I told myself I did this out of safety, and there was nothing wrong with that, but I didn't think about the consequences to my actions, to that person who saw me tense up, because he was guilty of walking while black. Beyond this clear example, I have started to dig deeper and work to dismantle my fears, especially paying attention to examples where my prejudices are more insidious. I don't know how many of y'all are active users of the app Waze. It's a great free-to-use app that directs you, gets you where you're going and helps you avoid traffic. But sometimes I feel like the way that the algorithm works is if you can avoid 15 seconds, it's going to take you off a very easy to go path, and you're going to go through some neighborhood and you're going to go left and then stop and then right and then another left, and you're winding your way through often parts of the town that I might have considered sketchy. I know I kind of joked to my husband that, well, Waze really ought to have a premium feature so you can have this ghetto avoidance option. And as I worked on this sermon and thought about places in my life where I continued to have racist views, I realized this was the perfect example. I didn't say I wanted to avoid areas where black people live, but I do think in my mind that's what I was worried about. I was using this coded language of sketchy or ghetto when I was really just reinforcing these notions of fear around people of color. So it's frightening for me to stand here today and be open and honest about these views. I don't want y'all to think of me as a racist. I don't want to be judged, but I must be upfront as I do the work of dismantling racist beliefs and attitudes that I have in my own life. And I must also express fear as to how to go about dismantling racism in our society and its institutions. It seems such a daunting and a large task that it just seems too big of a problem to even know where to begin. But I think the first step is to start to initiate conversations about race. And it's hard to start those conversations because it's difficult to talk about race because we don't want to disturb that negative peace that's so easy for us as white people to maintain. Avoiding conflict is often viewed as a greater good than causing tension. And so too often, we may just let things go. But to dismantle racism in ourselves and in our institutions, we must do the hard work. So how do we talk about race? An important resource I found is Aluo Ijioma's 2019 book, So You Want to Talk About Race. The book is chock full of insight and would be a great book club choice. But let me share with you some tips that really resonated with me. First, before beginning any discussion about race, I need to understand my intentions going into why am I having this particular conversation? Why does this issue matter to me? Am I trying to communicate my belief about something? Am I trying to understand something better? Or really am I just showing off my white liberalism and making someone think that I'm a good person because I'm progressive? The second point is as I initiate conversations, I got to keep that intention in mind. Because sometimes these conversations can start to go sideways and they get derailed because emotions, feelings, prejudices, fears, all of these things come up and we lose track of that intention. Another point is sometimes it's helpful to state that intention to the person that you want to talk with, especially if you want to talk with someone of color about race. People of color so often don't have the luxury of dealing with race. It is something that's front and center in their lives all the time. So before we initiate a conversation, it is helpful for us to give them that right and to respect that right, for them not to have that discussion. And if they have the discussion with us, we need to honor that. And we need to make sure if things do start to get heated that we don't interject and tone police. I can't require a person to discuss their racial oppression with me in words and language and conversation and tone so that I'm comfortable. It can't be about me. If Satyagraya is holding on to truth, as Gandhi told us, then its opposite would be holding on to falsehoods. As much as I abhor thinking about areas where I might be racist, I cannot blind myself to my reality. I cannot choose the negative peace and the absence of tension above the positive peace and presence of justice. Let us journey toward spiritual wholeness by working together to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. May our actions accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Amen. So now join with me as we listen to another wonderful piece by Corey Dodgens, Our World is One World. Go into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to what is good. Render to no one evil for evil. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.